The cowboy found water for the Apaches. The chief lined up 22 women, and his response was shocking. Elias Crow had spent most of his life wandering the frontier. A man who never stayed long enough in one place to grow roots, but never moved fast enough to forget the ghosts trailing behind him. For months he had ridden through desolate land searching for something to quiet the gnawing restlessness inside him, until one afternoon he stumbled across a scene that froze his breath. An Apache settlement on the edge of collapse. Horses stood motionless near the camp, ribs showing, tongues dry. Warriors who once carried pride in their posture now leaned over from thirst, and children huddled near their mothers with hollow eyes and dust-coated lips. Elias had seen hardship before, but nothing like the silent desperation that clung to this camp like a final prayer refusing to die. When he rode in, several scouts circled him with drawn bows. But the chief, a stern man with braided hair, an iron straight back, and an expression carved by responsibility, lifted a hand to halt them. The chief's name was Coda, and though he said little, his eyes spoke clearly. They were at the brink. Their river had vanished weeks ago, swallowed by the earth after a sudden shift underground. The closest water source lay beyond a canyon few dared to enter, a twisted maze of stone where even seasoned trackers lost their way. Elias felt the weight of all those desperate eyes on him, and something in him refused to turn away. He told the chief he had crossed the canyon years before, while hunting a group of raiders, and remembered a narrow passage that led to a hidden spring. Coda studied him with suspicion, trusting. An outsider was never simple, but desperation blurred the old lines between friend and stranger. With a curt nod, he sent Elias with 2 scouts to confirm whether the spring still flowed. The journey was brutal. The canyon walls rose high and tight like jaws of rock ready to snap down. The heat pressed against them, and the horses stumbled often. But Elias recognized landmarks he had memorized long ago. A split boulder shaped like a claw, a crooked juniper that looked like it had been twisted by lightning, a ridge that echoed footsteps louder than natural. Hours passed before they reached the spot he had hoped to find empty. Instead, they heard it first, a shimmering, soft rush like the whisper of a promise. The spring was still alive, water glistening between stones as though the earth itself guarded one last secret meant for the dying. Elias knelt and felt the cold liquid run through his fingers, and for a moment he felt a small spark in his chest, something he had not felt in years, purpose. The scouts stared in disbelief, then raced back to the village to deliver the news while Elias remained behind to map a safe path for the tribe. When the Apaches arrived hours later, carrying their children, their elders, their hope, Coda stood before Elias and studied him with a new expression. Not gratitude, not admiration, but something heavier and more complicated. The tribe drank, refilled their barrels, washed their faces, and let the smell of fresh water soothe their fear. As they did, Elias found himself watching them quietly, unaware that his life was about to shift into something he could never have anticipated. When they returned to the camp, Coda gathered his people and spoke in a deep, resonant voice that carried across the silent air. According to tradition, when a stranger saves the tribe from ruin, the tribe must honor him with a gift beyond simple thanks, gift that binds destiny to destiny. Elias didn't understand the weight of those words until the next morning. When Coda summoned him to stand before the largest teepee in the settlement, the entire tribe formed a circle. The air felt thick with anticipation. Then the flap of the teepee opened, and 22 young Apache women stepped out, dressed in ceremonial attire, standing in a straight line. Their expressions were serene, and they moved with the grace of people who understood their role in a moment far larger than themselves. Elias's stomach tightened. He looked at the chief, confused, unsure what he had stepped into. Coda raised his hand, and the murmur of the tribe softened instantly. The chief explained that these women represented the highest honor the tribe could offer, choice given only to a man whose actions had directly saved the tribe's survival. Elias was to choose one of them to become bound to him, not in ownership, but in a sacred partnership the Apache believed tied the strength of the tribe to the strength of its allies. It was a tradition rarely used, almost mythic, and many in the tribe had only heard elders whisper about it. Elias felt as though the ground shifted beneath him. He had expected gratitude, perhaps a handshake, maybe even a place to rest a few nights, but this was something else entirely. The women stared at him calmly, waiting. Some held worry in their eyes, others curiosity, others a quiet acceptance of fate. Elias looked from one face to another, overwhelmed by the enormity of what was being asked. He had spent his life avoiding attachments, avoiding responsibility deeper than a quick job or a passing town. Yet here he stood being offered something sacred and irreversible. He opened his mouth to speak, but the chief lifted a hand to silence him, saying he did not want an answer yet. Elias must first understand what this choice meant for them and for him. The women, the chief said, were not being given away. They were offering themselves to the future of the tribe. And Elias needed time to understand the weight of the tradition before deciding anything. The cowboy nodded, still wrestling with the shock of it all, unaware that the upcoming hours would challenge everything he believed about himself, loyalty, and the cost of saving others. Elias barely slept that night, turning over the chief's words again and again as the fire outside dimmed to embers. He had crossed paths with tribes before, had traded, fought, alongside some against others, but never had he been pulled into the heart of their traditions. As dawn crept over the horizon, Coda summoned him once more, this time not with ceremony, but with the solemn tone of a man about to share truths usually kept behind generations of silence. They walked away from camp, past the grazing horses and toward a ridge overlooking the valley. Coda spoke of the tribe's ancient law, explaining that the offering of 22 women had nothing to do with possession or reward. Each woman represented a lineage, and by standing before Elias, they were symbolically offering their bloodlines loyalty to him if he accepted the responsibility of protector. This pact, he learned, was granted only once every few generations, and only to those whose actions altered the tribe's fate. Elias felt a heaviness settle in his chest. He had seen enough of the world to know that trust this deep was never given lightly. As they returned to camp, he noticed the eyes of the tribe on him, not with fear or pressure, but with a quiet patience, as if they understood the turmoil inside him. The 22 women stood near the main teepee, speaking softly among themselves. Some glanced at him briefly, others kept their gaze lowered. They were not objects waiting to be chosen. They were individuals bound by duty to their people. And Elias realized something important. The ceremony was not about him claiming someone. It was about him choosing whether he was willing to share his life and loyalty with the tribe. For the first time in years, he felt the weight of a decision that mattered. He approached them slowly, his boots kicking up dust. They straightened in a line, their expressions calm. One of them, a woman with dark eyes steady as polished stone, stepped slightly forward, not out of arrogance or expectation, but out of a quiet courage. Elias recognized her from earlier. She had been the one who met his gaze without fear. Her name, he later learned, was Naili. She did not smile. She did not bow. She simply held his eyes as if searching for the truth inside him. He sensed strength in her, the kind born from years of holding her people together through hardship. In that moment, Elias realized he wasn't choosing beauty or companionship. He was choosing whether he believed in the future of these people he had saved, whether he was willing to stand beside them instead of passing through like a drifting ghost. He turned to the chief and said he needed to speak honestly before giving any answer. Coda nodded, and the tribe gathered around as Elias addressed them directly. He confessed that he had never belonged anywhere, that his life had been a long road of mistakes, losses, and broken ties. He admitted he feared failing anyone who put faith in him. But he also said the Apaches had shown him something he had not felt in years: purpose, unity, and courage. He spoke plainly, that he would never claim a woman as a possession, but if the tribe wished for a bond of loyalty, he would offer his life to their protection. The air grew still as his words settled. Coda stepped forward and placed a hand on his shoulder, telling him he had spoken in the way of a true warrior, one who understood the weight of responsibility. Then, in a gesture that startled everyone, Coda turned to the 22 women and dismissed the original terms of the tradition. Instead of Elias choosing one of them, the chief declared that the ceremony would be transformed to match the man who had saved them, not one of pairing but one of unity. The women lowered their heads respectfully, as Coda proclaimed that Elias was now a guardian ally, a role that bound him to the tribe as a trusted protector without forcing any woman into a life not freely chosen. It was an unprecedented alteration of tradition, but the tribe accepted it with reverence because the chief had seen the sincerity in Elias's heart. Naili stepped forward once more and offered him a simple token, a woven band made of horsehair and beads, symbolizing the tribe's trust. She tied it around his wrist, her hand steady, her expression softening just enough to show respect. Elias felt something shift inside him, something he had thought long dead. The tribe welcomed him not as an outsider, not as an owner, not as a chosen groom, but as a man who had earned his place among them by action and truth. Over the next days, Elias helped guide them back to the spring, taught the warriors new tracking methods, repaired saddles with the craftsmen, and shared meals with families who treated him as though he had always been part of them. He found himself laughing again, something he had forgotten how to do. The restless wanderer who once drifted without purpose now found meaning in every task, every conversation, every child who ran past him with bright eyes. And when he stood beside Nayeli one evening at the edge of the camp, watching the fires flicker across the field of teepees, he realized that the tribe had not offered him 22 women, they had offered him a chance at belonging. He took a deep breath, feeling the woven band on his wrist, and for the first time in many years, the world felt steady beneath his feet. The Apache had been saved from thirst, but in a way he never expected, so had he.